So, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight at Cancer Bridges. We are here with Carrie McCann, walking alongside the role of the death doula in cancer care. Carrie McCann is a death and grief companion, educator, gardener, and wellness consultant with 15 years of experience in supporting people through life's biggest transitions and changes. She strives to hold exploratory, accessible, and gentle space for people to honor difficult moments, acknowledge death, and be with grief. Drawing on her background in social work, breath and movement practices, and nature based approaches, Carrie offers practical, emotional, and spiritual support for dying, grief, and loss of all kinds to individuals, communities, and organizations. Carrie is passionate about helping people experience more moments of care and connection and explores the many ways this can look through her work as a founder of Moonset and Company. Thank you for being with us tonight, Carrie. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Liza. I appreciate you all having me. Like Liza said, my name is Carrie, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how death doulas can be supportive in cancer care and beyond. And I'm going to do a little bit more sharing about how I got into this work. And then I'll talk kind of broadly what death doulas are, what their many roles are, and then I'll share a little bit more about my practice specifically. But before we do that, and let's see if we can advance here. So did my slide advance on your end? Amazing. I'd love to just take a breath together. I know all of us are coming from, I'm sure, a bajillion different things, and we're at the end of a day. So I'd love to take a moment and just center into this time and space, in whatever way feels comfortable for you. So I will guide a couple things, but if you have something else that you need to do, if you need to move or stretch or sway or stand up or do whatever you need to do, I really invite you to take care of yourself in this moment and all the time. So if it feels okay, maybe take a big breath in and a big breath out. Good. And maybe take another big breath in through your nose and a big breath out through your mouth. And if you can notice anything that feels tense in your body. Maybe your shoulders are up in your ears as they love to be. Maybe there's something else going on. See if you can let that settle. And if not, that's okay. Our bodies talk to us in all different kinds of ways. And see if you can maybe find a point that feels neutral on your body. Maybe that's your fingertips or your elbow. Just take a moment, bring some awareness into that feeling of neutrality. And if it feels good, maybe rock a couple times from side to side. Maybe reach your arms up above your head. And if your arms are above your head, we'll breathe in and breathe out. Shake it down. Maybe shake your shoulders out. Just realized I'm moving my whole computer, so I'm sorry if you were looking at the screen. And maybe take one more stretch and a big sigh. Um, I hope that was supportive for you as we are entering into this space together. So, like I said before, my name is Carrie. And let's see what's feeling important to share. My background is in social work. So I graduated with my social work degree back in 2011. And I've kind of had like a winding path into the work that I do now. And a big piece of it is my personal story. So I'm going to kind of weave those together. So my career started working with children and families, and I got really burnt out doing that and had a lot of health issues myself. And so I kind of took a step back from social work and was figuring out how to support myself and found yoga and mindfulness and meditation during that time. I started working with plants during that time. Mostly, I started out as an herbalist. And then what really brought me to the work of being a death doula and working in end of life care was within the same year, my mom and my dog and my husband were all diagnosed with cancer. So my mom and my husband are both in remission and doing really, really well now. But that year completely changed my life. And as you all know, grief comes in many shapes and sizes and for many reasons. And I didn't realize I was grieving. And I had a really amazing therapist at the time who was like, "Hey, I think you're grieving." And it made me start to take a look at grief and want to um, know more about grief in a culture that does not talk about grief and does not acknowledge the many ways that grief shows up. Um, so I'll talk a little bit more about one of those experiences in a bit. But that started in 2018, and around 2020, I got my death doula certification and started to figure out how to weave all these many things together. And I'll keep sharing those threads a little bit as we go through. You all already shared about you, so I'm grateful to know a little bit more about who's here today. So what is a death doula? A death doula comes in many names. So some people say death doula, some people say end of life doula. I most often, when I'm just speaking to someone, call myself a death worker. There are lots of names for this role. And I also want to say this, a death doula is very much, I think, in the zeitgeist right now. It's become a popular thing. A lot of celebrities are becoming interested in death work, um, which I think has lots of pros and cons. But I'm glad that people are bringing awareness to this work. But death doulas have existed since humans have existed. People have always supported people in their community through both major illnesses, major life events, and through end of life. So death doulas offer a broad range of non-medical, non-legal support, and we're going to talk more about what that actually means. We provide personalized and compassionate support to individuals and their loved ones as they navigate death, loss, and major life changes, major health events. And we can be involved in at any time in someone's life. So some people reach out to a death doula when there's nothing going on, or maybe a loved one has died and they're starting to think about their own end of life and their own death, or yeah. So at any point in someone's life, they can reach out to a death doula. So what we are not, some of us are these things in addition to, but when we are in the role as a death doula, we are not medical practitioners, we are not therapists, and we're not lawyers. Though much of the work is therapeutic and adjacent to the medical and legal systems, we are not actually providing that level of support. So what actually is a death doula? Death doulas help to navigate all the millions of things that happen. And I think specifically um, in the context of oncology care and cancer support, like I said, all of the things that happen when there is a diagnosis. And I'll give a little bit more of an example, but part of the reason I came into this work is because specifically when my mom was diagnosed, she was inpatient in the hospital for a while. And because I am a social worker, I ended up like kind of being a social worker for my family. And I was like trying to figure out next steps. I was communicating with the medical team the most. I was communicating with the hospital social work team. And I really became that point person. I was making appointments. I was figuring out like what kind of paperwork needed to be done. And I was like, wow, wouldn't it be nice if there was someone to help coordinate all of this? And it turns out there is. I just didn't know it at the time. And that person is a death doula. So death doulas are able to sort of take like all of that overwhelming wave of information and to-do lists when there is a change in health and kind of help break that down a little bit and help families keep track of everything that's going on. And organize it a little bit and kind of help with that, um, the flow of information so that families can really be with their emotions and be with what's coming up for them and not have to worry about like, did I call the insurance company and trying to remember what they said? Um, so helping with the sort of logistics of that. Another big thing that death doulas do is supporting with legacy projects. And this photo makes me laugh all the time because it really resonates with me as someone who is a hangry person. I feel like if I had a bench, it might say this. But legacy projects can look all different kinds of ways. And they can be as creative and individual as you are. So that might look like a scrapbook or a recipe book. My aunt wrote down her life story and gave it, like, she wrote it down, I think probably at least 10 times and gave it to my sisters and all of my cousins, which was such a special thing. Another example I love of this, of how individual it can be, is I saw a story about someone who really loves synchronized swimming. And so they organized like a synchronized swimming party in in a kiddie pool and had that be part of a living funeral ceremony. And it's something that that tradition has gone on and people do it every year. So creating traditions, big or small, creating something physical that shows a little bit about who you are. And um, living funerals is another thing that I think is really interesting when it comes to legacy, which is what it sounds like. So having a funeral while you're still alive. And this is something that can be really meaningful for folks to plan. I supported one and they had a variety show as their living funeral because that was, or as a piece of it, because that was a really big piece of their life. And folks can do obituary writing, which can be another way to think about our legacy and what we're leaving behind. Another big thing is supporting family conversations. So this can be conversations about next steps, and that can be very broad. So medical next steps or logistical next steps, um, providing education and navigating difficult conversations. So a couple examples here from my own work. In one situation, there was someone navigating the end of their life, and they were trying to figure out how to talk to some of the young people in their life about it. So I was able to bring all of the family together and have a conversation about what this might look like in an age-appropriate way and provide different resources for the family to continue that conversation. Um, Another thing might be, let's say if the sibling is, or if a child is the medical decision maker and there's um, disagreement about what next steps are, even though that one person might be the decision maker. They want everyone to come together to talk about it, but there's disagreement in the room. That can be another area where a death doula who has this experience can support. And I should say, I'll take a sip of water. Um, when I'm talking about family, I mean family however you define it. So family, community, whoever the important people are in your life. And I think most death doulas feel the same way. It's whoever you're bringing together as the people that are your important people in your life. So at the end of life, when someone is nearing the end of life, a big thing I think that people think about when they think of a death doula is that sitting vigil. Um, and that really looks like just sitting with and being with the person who's dying and whoever they choose to have with them. Um, that might also mean like making sure the people they want are there and making sure the people they don't want there aren't there. Like sometimes that is a thing that happens. And it's not only supporting the person who's dying, but really supporting that whole community of folks that are coming together. Um, I think as I've grown more in this practice, I've really feel the importance of supporting the people around the person who's dying so that they can support the person who's dying. Um, and that can look like a lot of things. Like sometimes it's checking in and being like, hey, have you had water? Have you had a protein bar? Have you nourished like your physical needs, and your basic needs so that you can be present for this moment? And another way that looks is helping to slow things down. So, example of that is when someone does die. So, let's say we've sat vigil and someone dies, there's the things can start to move really quickly. And that can be a natural thing that happens. And so, one of the things a death doula can do is slow that down. So, there's almost always someone in the room who's like, someone died. We need to call people. We need to step into action. We need to do these things. But a death doula can help slow that process down, remind people there's no rush. We don't have to rush through this. We can spend time being with our family member. I'll call the hospice. Like we can make the call to the funeral home, but really slowing that process down so people can be present and be in in their emotions and with their loved one and with each other, supporting each other through that moment, and no one's rushing through that time. Um, excuse me. And then after someone dies, I think about grief, which is so, I mean, we're thinking about grief the whole way along, as we talked about. But after someone dies, I think about sitting at the kitchen table, which is often how it looks, and that person, the caregiver, the family member, whoever it may be, is likely going through a big checklist of all the things that they need to do and call the insurance company or the credit card company or Social Security or whoever. And a death doula is able to come and literally sit with them at the kitchen table. And we're able to work through some of those things together, get through some of that kind of logistical checklist, but also allow people to grieve in that moment and to have grief in that moment and kind of holding both of those things, the logistics and the making space for grief as we work through some of those things that we have to do that no one wants to do. We're able to support through that process. And rituals is also a big piece of a lot of our work. My throat is getting very dry from all the talking, so please excuse me. Um, and rituals can be big or small. So It might be working with an individual who is dying or whose loved one died, or maybe um, a small family and working with them to develop rituals of support, either daily rituals or a one-time ritual. But it can also be a larger community ritual. So sometimes that's more traditional, like a funeral or a home funeral. Or it can also be like rituals not surrounding a death. So that could be like a, a ceremony for like eco grief, or a ceremony for some of the larger political grief that we're experiencing. So any kind of, again, big or small rituals daily, or these sort of macro scale rituals, is something that a lot of death doulas are able to support with. And then, most importantly, we are listeners, we are advocates, and we are guides. One of the things I almost always end up working with people is um, what what to do when people say, "Let me know if you need anything." So like so often when something's going on with our health or our loved one's health and we're like feeling underwater, we don't know how to answer that question. It's like, yeah, I need things, but I don't know what I need. So we actually sit together and figure out what some of those things are and figure out how to wrap your community around you, how to tell the people who are already wanting to love on you, tell them how they can love on you. And we are able to be a part of your system of care. So again, like being in that community with you and really kind of like guiding and directing the way that you want to be cared for and supporting the way that you want to be cared for. And death work is vast and broad. A lot of us in this field come from all different kinds of backgrounds. So I shared a little bit about mine. I'll share a little bit more in a moment. But we have so many different life experiences. We have so many different professional experiences. So um, we have all different trainings. There's lots of organizations out there doing training. So when you are thinking about if you want to work with a death doula or finding a death doula, find someone who matches you. You know, there's a lot of us out there. You don't have to work with me or work with whoever. Figuring out who the right fit is. And a couple things kind of like about the field more broadly is it's, like I said earlier, it's both as old as time and also newer. So um, there's little regulation around, there's no regulation around who can call themselves a death doula, which again, like, is both good and bad. Um, so there's less barriers to entry, but that means that not everyone is having the same education and the same experience. So if you're thinking about getting a death doula, make sure you're checking in like what their experience is, what their spiritual philosophies are, and learning a little bit about them to see if they're a good fit for you. What else did I want to say here? Yeah, I think that's what I'll say. We are as broad, like some of us are artists and are able to weave art into our practices and do like really interesting things. So just finding the person that's the right fit for you. So my practice has shifted a little bit over, well, really over since I started. I started practicing around 2020, and back in November, I took a full-time job as the bereavement coordinator at McGee. And so that's changed. Having a full-time job has changed what I'm able to offer. Um, but the three things that I focus on most are grief care, embodied care, and community care. And again, the thinking about grief as a full spectrum of grief. So we're not just grieving after somebody dies. There's grief in caregiving, there's grief in dying, there's grief in that whole process. Um, Embodied care, I focus on something that I'll talk about in a little bit, which is called therapeutic horticulture, just getting into the garden with our grief. And I'm also a yoga and mindfulness practitioner and teacher, so that's something that's woven into most everything that I do. And then community care is a big aspect of what I do. And like I said before, however, we're defining community, but how do we find ways to um, support that kind of whole system of people? So I provide one-on-one services to individuals and family members. Um, I'll talk a little bit about the pictures here. So the picture on the left was working with someone who was grieving, and harvesting plants with them and kind of going through that process. And we're harvesting the plants and talking about what grief looks like in that moment. The middle picture is actually a family member. Actually, it's my aunt who I mentioned who made all the journals as her legacy project. She died about 10 years ago, and this is her grave. And coming from the tradition of planting flowers on my family's grave, that has become something that I offer for other folks as well, um, either with them or for them, depending on the situation. And then the last picture was a workshop that I did that we were creating little like mini flower bouquets, and they were offered to hospice patients afterwards. So a lot of times, if folks are in a assisted living facility, like having nice tiny little bouquets that you can bring in their room and hang on the board in there can be really nice. And giving people the opportunity to make something with their hands is also really therapeutic. So that's something that I weave into all my work that I do with folks. And a couple of the things that I tend to focus on in my practice is that education piece, the grief piece, and having some of those family conversations. Oh no, my middle picture didn't show up. Uh, so community-based workshops and education. My middle picture, with a friend of mine, we started an organization called Griefy Hearts Art Club, where folks are able to come and create art. And if they want to share about their grief, they can, but they certainly don't have to. But really, it's just a space that allows folks who are grieving to come and not have to pretend they're not grieving. And we make some sometimes really bad art together and sometimes beautiful art together, but we're there together either way. Um, I do lots of workshops around flowers and supporting people sort of in a holistic wellness way, and lots of education, much like tonight, doing education around different topics for communities. And then I also do consulting and work on different initiatives at organizational level. So figuring out what organizations need, how they can support their staff better or support the people that they work with, and figuring out what kind of workshops or education makes sense for them. And I think the biggest takeaway, if I have one takeaway for you, is that we are not meant to do this alone, and to lean on the people in your community, the people who are there supporting you already. And if it makes sense to also lean on other professionals, please do that as well. But really, we're not meant to do any of this alone because it's hard. And we are beings meant to be in community with each other. And so that's all I've got. We have lots of time for questions. This is my contact information, and I invite you to please reach out if you need anything or have questions or think I might be a good fit or are curious how to find a different doula, please don't hesitate to reach out.